you can always go back. If you try out a new job and you decide that you miss your old career, it's not like your past experience is just gone away. So I think so many people are afraid to take risks because they're afraid they lose everything going for the new thing. No, your experience, your history, your past is still there. It's going for it and knowing that you can always go back to where you were before, or who knows where it could take you next by going for it and taking that risk.
Welcome to the Travel Not to Escape podcast. I'm your host, Jolene on the Go, solo female traveler and creative entrepreneur. Think of me as your skydive instructor, empowering you to take the leap into solo travel to push past your fears and transform your life. Join me every Tuesday as we explore the world of solo travel with purpose and discover how you can use it for your personal transformation, learn how to make meaningful connections around the world, and reignite your spirit of play. We aren't just talking about traveling to find ourselves anymore. We're all about doing the work to understand who we authentically are, breaking through our limiting beliefs, and taking the leaps to manifest lives we are excited about. Through interviews, solo episodes, meditations, each episode is packed with practical tips, strategies, and inspiring stories from guests who have transformed their lives through solo travel. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting out on your journey, the Travel Not to Escape podcast is here to inspire and empower you to solo travel with purpose. Strap on your helmet. We're about to jump headfirst into the journey of a lifetime. Are you ready? Let's go. Do you want to know how to make friends while solo traveling? This question comes up so often and is a big one that holds so many women back from traveling. And I'm so excited to share that I'll be hosting a free workshop on January 24th, and I'm spilling all of my connection secrets. Hard learned from over 10 years of solo traveling, hosting travel meetups, play events, and chatting with other solo travelers on this podcast. Spaces are limited, so save your seat on travelnottoescape.com/free class, and I'll also link it in the show notes. See you there. Welcome, navigators, to another episode of Travel Not to Escape. I am so very excited to introduce you to our guest today, Kristin Vierra, who is a remote career and lifestyle coach. And I'm excited to have her on here today. We're going to be chatting about her story of transformation and also diving into what slow, intentional travel looks like, especially in Latin America, where we had actually connected, I think, a couple of years ago now in Buenos Aires. And so thank you so much for being on today. Welcome, Kristin.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk all about this and to reconnect on a podcast, which we did back in BA, if you remember. Yes.
I do. Yeah. And it's a full circle moment from doing that podcast to now having my own and interviewing you on it. So this is where we're at now. And we have so much to catch up on too. And I want to know just all about your travels that have happened over the last 2 years. But let's first start with a question that I ask all of my guests. I love starting with play. I don't think that we as adults have play as our focus anymore. And I really want to start off our conversation just understanding what your favorite childhood activity was.
Oh my gosh, this is a great question. Now thinking back to growing up, I was thinking the present. I was like, I've got a long list.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I love this question. Thinking back, growing up, I loved gymnastics was something I was really interested in. And it's can be challenging, right? But it takes flexibility and it definitely challenged me. So it was both a hobby and play. And unfortunately, I had this surgery when I was little and I had to stop it. And I remember how sad I was. But I picked it up later again. But I would say tumbling gymnastics.
Ah, interesting. I had another guest on that she also was tumbling, trampoline, loved that. And her play style, so each childhood activity gives us a little bit more information about our play style. And that being your top activity tells me that you're a kinesthetic. And so being in your body feels like play to you. And that makes a lot of sense, knowing you and knowing what your favorite hobbies are, which we'll chat about later and actually throughout this episode. But I could definitely see why kinesthetic is your play style and why certain activities that you do, that I know that you do, light you up. More to come on that. I'm excited. And I think you also mentioned, did you like competing as a gymnastics, or was it more just about the being in the body?
So I didn't compete when I was young, but that hobby evolved and I did competitive cheer in high school and college. And so that was also using gymnastics. like I said, I had to stop when I was little with the surgery, and then when I ended up later in life picking it up as part of cheer, I competed with that. It was like play young and came back.
Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, because I was wondering if a competitor could also be one of your play styles, if that's
Potential.
also something that lights you up. So it could be you could have 2, but that gives me a little bit more
Yes.
insight into you as well. Okay, so I wanna dive into your background, and I wanna start from the very beginning. If you could tell me a bit about, where you grew up, what your background is, where you're from, and also how you got your start in solo traveling.
Yeah, so I grew up in California, and that was basically where I lived until I ventured abroad. So California was my home state, my only home state up until leaving the country. So that was a big change for many reasons. And I went to school in Santa Barbara and then started working and living in San Francisco. And that connects to my first solo travel experience because living in San Francisco, I was really career driven and spent a lot of time working to grow my career, and travel was not a high priority. I did, like many do, the vacation when you can get time off work, and I went to Europe and did very easy, I would say easier travel. And then I had this constant itch because I had always had a dream of living in Spain. And so I studied and minored in Spanish in college and wasn't, due to many circumstances, able to study abroad. So it never left. And so living in San Francisco, that itch never fully went away. And so I impulsively, when I was unhappy in a job, applied to teach in Spain. And the irony of the situation is that I ended up finding a new job after applying that was a dream job working at Beats and Music. So it was a music company, it was a startup, and I was able to move up and take a lot of ownership as a recruiter. So I went for it. And then I was like, oh, there goes Spain. But it was too excited. I was too excited about it to let it affect the Spain thing. And then I got accepted to Spain teaching as I was in the job. And then 3 months into this job, Apple acquired the company. And so I was at this turning point where I could go for Apple opportunity or I could leave and take a package. And that's when I was like, you know what? I'm taking this package because Spain is still on the mind. And that was my first solo travel experience, which was going to Spain after that, taking leaving the job after the acquisition and traveling for a month solo. And the funny thing is, I always talk about my Central America solo travel experience because it was 3 months, it was super transformative, and it was my biggest solo travel experience before moving abroad. But Spain was actually the first. And it was what the itch was always in me to experience that led to a ripple effect after.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow. I want to dive into so many different parts of that story. I don't even think we've chatted all about Spain either. Going back a little bit, so Santa Barbara, San Francisco, did your family travel at all when you were younger, or were you the odd one out that had this itch?
Yeah, we did, and I'm super grateful for it that we have family in Hawaii. So we did a lot of trips and a beautiful place to go visit family reunions there. So, yes, more like that type of travel, some vacations to the Caribbean also. My mom has heritage there, so we would go. But it was, you know, I was privileged that we did a lot of family trips and vacations, but it was definitely way different type of travel when I think about reality now.
Yeah, and when you were having this itch to go to Spain, did your family at all have any hesitations or some fears for you? They're like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" Or just stay in California, it's fine here. What kind of came up in that process?
It's funny because the Spain thing with post college, after studying and really having the itch to practice the language more, I kept a secret. So I didn't tell anyone when I applied. I'm gonna see if this lands and then maybe it'll happen. And then with the acquisition, I made the decision and then let everyone know because it was too long overdue and an opportunity presented itself to take a break before finding a new job.
And were the people around you supportive in the decisions that you were making, or was it completely left field? What is she doing with her life?
Great question. So the funny thing is, this one didn't feel so drastic because it was a shorter solo trip. But when I did the backpacking trip where I left my job, put my stuff in storage, and was planning to move out of the city. That's a different story. where where there's a lot more, "What are you doing?" But then it turned into support, but at first, it was the, "Whoa, are you sure? Is this what you really want?" And those types of things, but then it turned into more support. So, it was actually, now that I am sharing the Spain one, which I typically talk more about Central America, is it was a
Mhm.
progression. It was Spain, Central America, Spain 1 month, Central America 3 months, move abroad fully.
Oh,
Like,
interesting. Okay.
yeah.
I love that you share that too, because I think a lot of people have this vision of living this life, this full-time digital nomad life, and they're like, "Okay, but what does that look like? How do I get there? And what are the things that kinda come up for it?" And that's one of the things I wanna demystify is, one, a path can look different for everyone, but I wanna share what it actually does look like, for each of the guests that has come on and has not only, used travel to escape whatever it was that they were unhappy about when they were in their situation, but use those experiences and change their life completely to design a life that they're actually really excited about. And I know that's something that you've done. So you initially set off on a 1 month. Was that the plan? Was just a 1 month backpacking trip through Spain, or was it going to be longer initially?
So Spain was just 1 month, and I had the flight there and the return flight. A different story is the Central America trip. When I left my job, this was a few years after Spain, when the travel itch, again, as we know,
Came
comes
back.
back. And I was unhappy in my role and not feeling I was growing and wanting to move cities. So I was thinking I wanted to move US cities. So there's two conversations I had on one specific weekend with two different people who were, if you're moving cities and changing your job, why wouldn't you travel? And it was like a light bulb of, that's so true. Why wouldn't I take this opportunity? When I put all my stuff into storage and then went on that trip, it was a one-way ticket. So that was that first one-way ticket experience of not knowing how long it would be, which is a rush, as we all know. Now I live on
Yeah.
one-way tickets.
Yeah. All one-way tickets. Yeah, exactly. Booked days in advance, if not the day of. Spain, what was the transformation that you experienced? Because it had to have been some huge change that happened within you in order to get you the confidence to get rid of everything and book a one-way ticket to Latin America. So I'm wondering what happened in Spain, and what did you anticipate that trip was going to be for you, and who did you become after that trip?
Yeah, I think it was just Spain was more, it was more comfortable solo travel for me. I had friends in certain parts, which was lucky, and I think Spain was just excitement around language and culture. It was the first, I'm using Spanish all the time. Oh, I am practicing, I'm improving, and I'm experiencing these different cities because I went to different cities throughout Spain on that trip. And then I think it was just really thriving in that setting of loving the culture, loving the language. And then when I think about, because there was a gap coming back between that trip in Latin America, it was a whole different fear that I pushed through to go to Central America. It was more, it felt way more real because my stuff was not, I had no more apartment. Left my job with, which was me choosing to leave a job. It wasn't like an acquisition situation, right? And a job that was super, I love my coworkers, I love the company, but I was just not growing. And it was all my choices. So it was more real and more, you could say, more fear was coming up for that one. So I think that's why I share more about Central America, because Spain was, it felt like an extended vacation. And then Central America felt like intense transformative solo travel.
Yeah, and
And maybe it was the
when you
phase of
were
life
yeah,
too.
that's true. Yeah, and I'm wondering, so after Spain, because you didn't have Latin America on your mind when you were in Spain, right? You were like, "Hey, I'm
No.
gonna be in Spain, I'm gonna do this for a month," and then you came back, and I think the comeback period when someone leaves from a transformational experience, from a solo travel trip, that's the period where you have to sit with yourself, and you have to feel the difference, and you have to face what your life actually looks like after knowing what it could possibly look like. And I'm wondering what got you from post Spain to giving everything up.
Yeah, it's so funny processing this now because I haven't thought about this honestly, the difference. But now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it, with after Spain, I was ready to go back, settle into my life in San Francisco. It wasn't like the I'm ready to move to Spain. I don't know. There were different things making I think at the time making me feel like San Francisco was still the place to be. But when a I think it was a few years after when I did the Latin America one, it was way more of I don't want to be in San Francisco anymore. And it was 2 years of being there and wanting to leave and not having left. So it was a way different feeling leaving for that trip.
Oh,
And
okay. So
and
it
no
wasn't
return ticket.
immediate. Okay, so I
No.
was thinking it was right after. So you had come back from Spain and continued your life for 2 years in San Francisco, working in corporate. And then, yeah, what was that final thing that got you to be like, "You know what? I'm ready."
Yeah, it was 2 or 3 years, I need to count, but yeah, somewhere around there, a few years, and I think it was just so I think about this a lot. First of all, it was career growth, and I wasn't growing in the job I was in, so I was feeling stagnant in life, but I remember I kept being like, "What's missing?" And I kept trying to like, "Oh, do I need to take the certification? No, it's not the certification. Oh, do I need to start this new hobby? It's not the hobby." And I kept trying to figure out what the missing piece was, and then it was like, "No, there's something bigger that needs to change." And I couldn't really identify it. And then part of the leaving to travel was just to explore and figure out what the change I really wanted was, which I thought was moving cities in the US. That was what I think it's this. I think I want to be in a new city in a new environment. And then what's so transformative is what came from that trip was way beyond that clarity. And it was just trying to understand what this missing piece was. And then now in hindsight, I can say it was wanting to be outside of the US because I've never thought about what's missing since I moved abroad.
Got it. Yeah, so that feeling hasn't resurfaced since you made those changes. And so
Yeah.
when you gave up your apartment and quit your job and bought the one-way ticket, was that with the intention, so you were thinking you were going to just move cities in the US, so was that why you had given everything up because you thought you were going to come back, or once you finally gave everything up you're like, no, we're going to do this for end game? What was that looking like
Yeah.
initially?
Yeah, so initially it was that, take the trip because my stuff is in storage. It's worth the time to go travel, the 2 people who planted that seed,
Hmm.
and then come back and move cities to San Diego, which we both have lived in.
Yeah.
So that was my plan, and that is what happened. I put in storage, went on the went to Central America. I thought it was gonna be a month, but it turned into 3 months of travel because I just wanted to keep going. I remember one day actually emailing my dad and being like, "I think I wanna just keep going. I'm not ready to come back." And so it turned into 3 months, and then I moved to San Diego. So then we're back in the US again,
Oh.
and we're
No, and
back
I
in a
think
new
that
city.
that's yeah, and I think that's really cool that you're wasn't just a one trajectory quit and now you're in this amazing digital nomad life. You're going back and forth, you work through some things, and I think that's really expansive for some people who think it's a one one decision and then that's it, right? It sounds like you had a bit of a path to get to where you're at now.
Yeah, and this is what now when I look back to the Spain, each one built a bit off of each other, right? The Spain one was a mini taste, and then the Central America one was transformative. So much came out of it. And then moving to San Diego and realizing, wait, this wasn't it. I thought this was it that was missing. I love San Diego still, but this isn't the place. And then I had this job that my project got put completely on hold my second week of work.
Oh,
So
wow.
we were in this waiting game, and I had all this time at work because we were still there. And I was like, what am I doing? Why don't I just like the itch hadn't gone away? So I started to apply to jobs outside of the US, literally, to be like, can I make this happen? And
Yeah.
that's what led to moving to Argentina.
Okay, interesting. And okay, so we talk about the transformation that you had in those 3 months that you were in Central Latin America. And I want to know, where did you start off? Where was your one-way ticket to? And yeah, let's start from there. I want to hear about what happened when you first got there.
Yeah, so my one-way ticket was to Lake Atitlan, very popular now for many, and it's beautiful. And it was Antigua de Lake Atitlan, but my first destination was the lake. And the funny thing is, it literally was inspired by a friend in San Francisco saying, "You've got to see this cool lake in Guatemala. Like, you've got to go there." And I looked it up and I was like, I want to go there. That's where I'm going to start. And I made the decision. It wasn't a ton of research, like, how is it safe? It was just literally seeing photos, I'd be like, "That's where I'm gonna go." And so I booked there to start there. And so it was a progression from there following going down to Nicaragua, to Costa Rica, and over to Colombia. So the path it's a travel route for many, I discovered in the process, but yeah, I just made it as I went, but it started there.
And how fast were you traveling at this point? Every few days, every week?
So funny to think about this question now, given how I travel. Definitely fast compared to now. It was
Yeah.
like it was like 2 wee okay, I did do a homestay on the lake with a family. Highly recommend this. Staying with a family, learning Spanish. That was a transformative experience in itself because you become a part and see the family's day to day, and they treat you like part of their family, and it was really cool to start with that. So that was a few weeks long, and that was the longest I was in one place on the lake, and then it was 2 weeks to 1 to 2 weeks in each place, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
different from how you travel now. And during those 3 months, if you could pinpoint a specific moment or maybe a couple of moments that really just and made you what were your aha moments?
The family. I never forget this. One of my aha moments was being with that family at a dinner table. No phones, just pure conversation and presence. And the dad, so genuinely interested in hearing what the daughter learned at school that day, asking about her music and the interaction and the love between the family members without any technology, just being so present and living with them in my room, being super minimalistic, the extreme of minimalism, and just being so content without. I mean, my Wi-Fi barely worked. I think I wasn't working because so I don't even remember what the Wi-Fi was like fully.
And what
And
year
just
was
like
this?
this was 2017. I believe. Yeah. So just seeing how their family operated and really seeing how much presence was with all of them and how much joy to seeing the daughter and how much joy she got sharing about her day and how they included me too as a foreigner here for a few weeks and then spending time with them was it made me reevaluate a lot of things about where time and energy how much we use technology just all of the materialistic things that I use on a day to day that I didn't need during that time. And then the language piece was amazing too, practicing with them. So that was one. Another one was reading a book throughout this whole trip, which my friend gifted me right before it. You may have read it, and if not, I think it's such an awesome book. She has great series, but it's Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass.
Oh, yes. I have read it and I love that book.
And reading that in this time period, it was so perfect to think about things and reflect on next steps. And her book is what inspired me first of I want to be a coach. Reading it, I just knew, I don't know, it was intuitively, I knew I was going to become a coach. I didn't know when, but I knew in my future I was going to reading that book.
And did you know at that point what kind of coach you wanted to be or what was the transformation that you wanted to help people with?
I didn't know fully, but I had a sense about career because so much of the journey was career shifts that had led to this trip. And also I just knew reading that book and even going back to San Francisco time, I have a deep passion for personal development and I always have. So I knew I wanted to channel that passion into helping others in some way because I was always reading self-help books, looking into new ways to improve and grow and reach goals. So yeah, I think connected all of those things.
So those are both amazing transformations, and I can see how you live your life in both now because I've met you post this all. So it's so interesting diving back into the past and seeing what the building blocks were, the steps that you took, the experiences that you had along your journey that got you to who I know now. So beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, and those were the first. That's what's crazy is that was so early on it. Yeah.
Those were your first glimpses, your first transformative experiences. But you had mentioned that you moved back to San Diego after this trip. So you went on a 3-month journey through Central South America, I think, and then you came back You moved your things from storage to San Diego. And what was your feeling at that point? Was that calling to be a coach still there, or did you turn it off for a little bit?
It was still there, and it's part of it evolved in San Diego because I met a friend who asked the question that inspired me to go after moving abroad, which was it was the spark in if you had no fear, what would you do right now? And that was move abroad. And then we became accountability partners and started to basically it's accountability partnership is coaching with someone else, right? So setting goals and taking action, right? So I was doing that basically with a friend, but that evolved into me continuing to do it when I was abroad. And so I was basically doing a lot of coaching on myself without knowing what coaching was fully before I moved abroad. And then moving when I moved abroad is when I got the final push to go for to enroll in a program and actually put all of these things I had been doing into understand them better and how I can use them to help others because I use them on myself so much. It was how do I apply this for others now? And I really will say the move abroad fully, all of that happened thanks to tools like goal setting, accountability, a lot of action taking, and working through blocks and limiting belief, and tools, meditation and visualization. All of those supported me making that full move to Argentina. And all of that happened in San Diego too.
Amazing. But when you
Yeah.
first moved to Argentina, it was originally you had gotten a job in Argentina. All of that prepared you to make that move, which is amazing. And then once you got to Argentina, wow, you're committed, right? You committed. Argentina, for those who haven't been, is really far. It is really far. You are going to the end of the world, basically. So you committed to go to this really far destination, sold all your things again, and yeah, now you're starting this new job. But at the back of your mind, you have this calling for more for your entrepreneurship journey. So what did your first move to Argentina look like? And also, what were the things that were coming up in terms of those blocks and fears and beliefs?
Yeah, and oh my gosh, it is so far. And now that we live there, I forget sometimes just how far I am when I'm there, and also
Yeah.
it amazes me how far it is, but it's so worth it.
Yeah.
But considering California too, or the US, it's as far
Mhm.
south as you can go basically. But
Mhm.
so, yeah, entering the job, I was thinking I was gonna be in this job for years potentially, who knows, transfer back to the US at some point, and I pushed the coaching thing down because I start a new job, focus on that's 5 to
Mhm.
10-year plan.
Yeah.
But I was still doing all those things on myself, goal setting, intention setting, meditating. So I was practicing those things, but not thinking about turning them into anything yet. But what happened was the job was not as expected. And
And then I feel like this is a pattern. This is a trend.
And again, exactly. Every job had a different story, but I learned so
Mhm.
much from each one. But this job was way different than expected, and it was super technical, and a lot of it was self-training, and it was the biggest challenge of my life potentially in a role because of entering an office in a foreign culture. Everyone speaks Spanish and but works in English. So when everyone's chatting, it's in Spanish, but when you get on a call, it's English. So you hear these
Um,
shifts constantly in the room, which is funny.
yeah.
So it's new environment, making new friends or working to make new friends. Cross-cultural differences, trying to understand cross-cultural differences. Highly technical role, trying to train yourself for a highly technical role. And then it's clients based in the US with high expectations, trying to
Mhm.
manage those clients. So it was basically the extremely stressful and maybe the highest stress I've ever been. And I was
Mhm.
settling into a new country alone all at the same time. And I honestly cried almost every night for the first
Mhm.
3 weeks, just not because of not being happy to be there, but because I was so stressed out and so
Mhm.
overwhelmed. And I look back at that as being part of what drove me to start my business was remembering that period of settling in and feeling so alone because no one I felt understood. Because
Mhm.
which of my friends had entered
Yeah.
a job in Argentina in a highly technical role in the specific culture? I didn't feel like I could ask anyone of, hey, like, how can I best do this? And so it was the biggest challenge of my life, but it was the most expansive period of my life too,
How did
because I
you
managed
yeah, what
it.
did you how did you manage it?
I learned ways to cope with the stress. I learned how to use my resources with colleagues and really kind coworkers who were helping me when I felt lost. I spoke with my managers and I learned to get into a rhythm with the job and to make my clients were happy. But what I did find myself in was working 10 to 12-hour days and not being able to enjoy, other than enjoy my coworkers and making friends at work, I wasn't able to enjoy the country or travel. I took 3-day weekends to go to Iguazu Falls, but I wasn't able to enjoy my evenings. I was always thinking about work. And then some other things happened in this job that really triggered my core values of transparency and empathy. And I hit a period where I can't do this job anymore. It's just not aligned with my core values. And I can feel that I'll never want to show up fully for it, feeling this way. So this is where the pivotal moment hit where I'm going to become a career coach because I don't want anyone to experience some of the things I've experienced. And I've learned so much from them. So what I want to do is take all this I've learned and help others not enter these situations. So that's when I left the job and I basically just gave notice. Well, it was like I made a decision. Actually, a close friend of mine that I met some amazing friends who supported me through this period. And I will never forget, one day sat on my Buenos Aires rooftop and she said, "You are going to quit this job." And I said, "I'm going to quit this job." Okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, "I'm going to make a deadline." And I wrote a deadline for myself of the day I would leave the job. And within, I think, the next 2 weeks, I gave notice and I left by that date.
Amazing.
And that's when the coaching journey started
Yeah.
because it hit such an intense moment of my values misalignment of
Mhm.
no, no one should feel this way. And I want to make sure they don't in a job.
And yeah, you touch on something so important is, and my favorite question is, what are your values? And we don't know, I didn't know that until a few years ago. But once my friend had asked me and actually told me there's an exercise, a really short exercise to understand what your values are, and then it really flows through all areas of your life. And then you now have the words to be able to describe why things don't sit right with you, why you're not happy, why you're not fulfilled. It's, oh, I just needed to know what 5 words I really cared about, and then now I can say it's all transparent. It's not hitting on my values of empathy. And it hits you in your core. And now you have something to
Yeah.
stand behind. So that's amazing that you had done the work prior to even identify why was it that you didn't feel good in the situation.
But I will say, to be honest, I knew my values like many of us do without even stating them sometimes.
Hmm.
But this is why I work with clients so intentionally to know their values. Because for
Hmm.
me, it took me feeling severely upset, uncomfortable. I couldn't do it anymore to
Hmm.
uncover what it was. And that's
Hmm.
also when I identified actually that I was such an empath because
Hmm.
I could tell I absorbed everyone's emotions around me at work along with my own. So everyone's stress, I could tell I was feeling along with my own. And there were so many things that I took away from this job that was just a high stress environment, right? Some people thrived in it,
Hmm.
but for me, it was not aligned for me or my
Hmm.
values. And this became so apparent. And it took one of my lowest points in the job and how I felt to uncover that, which is why I was
Mhm,
like, it shouldn't be that way. We should
mhm,
be able to know before, or at least have a good idea to make sure it's aligned. And that's what
mhm.
I took away to help others with is to get clear on the values first. So
Yeah.
then you're like, okay, of course
Yeah.
things can happen. You can't always be
Mhm.
100% prepared, but being clear on them can definitely be preventative.
Yeah, because then you know the signs, you know what you're looking for, you know what is not present. As soon as you walk in and you observe people, you can already gain a sense, and then you can ask the right questions as well before going into these situations. So I love that you help people now with some of the things that you've gone through.
Yeah, and I will say this company's culture was awesome. I will say I love the people, The role itself, it was it, and it was the
Stop.
environment and the specific role. But yeah, exactly. It's knowing that and asking the question, knowing the values, asking the questions, kind of feeling into the signs before going into a job, right?
And I love also that you brought up that you had a friend who told you, hey, you're going to need to quit. I had a very similar situation when I quit corporate, when I started realizing that me working 12 plus hour days when I was working, starting to work remote at this point post pandemic, and my other friends also in corporate were not working as long. And they told me, hey, you're different. Now that we're actually working and seeing you work, this isn't the same person that we know and love. You are not happy, and we're going to have to call that out, and you're going to need it. And so having people that know and love you tell you, hey, like,
Yeah.
you gotta do this. And it comes almost like it hits you harder because you're like, wow, my life is being reflected back at me through people that I know love and care about me. And if they say you're gonna need to go, it adds that extra layer for you where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna need to go. So I love the accountability that you got from that as well.
Yeah, so true, and it is that accountability and that outside view of, "No, you've gotta
Hmm.
know that this is not right. It shouldn't
But
feel this
yeah,
way."
we're so
And
good
what
at
I'll say is, like,
normalizing all the things, and we're like, "Oh, this is normal. Everyone in this job works long hours. Everyone else around me is doing it." But when you have someone that's not in that environment telling you,
yes!
"Nope, not normal."
And the challenge was all of my first friends were in the job. So that's all of
Mhm,
my and that was all of my community in BA at the start, which makes sense. I just moved and
mhm,
that and also to say this friend of mine, we had known each other for a few months.
mhm,
How lucky to meet such an amazing friend who and I mentioned this to her multiple times since of how grateful I am that she was there for that because I didn't have I was still 6 months into living in a foreign country. I still hadn't and this comes to finding your people does not happen right away, right?
mhm,
Building those really trusting friendships. This was someone that I was lucky to find that with quickly, but I didn't have many people like that yet in Argentina. It's actually crazy because after I left this job, my whole life in BA changed. And I started to
mm,
meet so many. I met, after leaving the job, I met basically all of the friends I'm super close to now in my community. And I started to do all of the things I had been wanting to do after leaving the job. And so my life, the first 6 months living in Argentina versus after leaving the job were two different stories and two completely different realities.
yeah, and I'm glad that you didn't associate the unhappiness with being in a different country and letting that make you run away back home and say, "You know what? Maybe Argentina was just not it for me," right? But I'm glad that you instead identified what wasn't working, and it was the job, and taking yourself out of that situation and clearing the space to let all the good things come into your life, the people, the new career path.
And great to highlight, that was a self-coaching happening of
Yeah.
isolate the problem. Do not attribute this to an entire country you haven't even
Country.
yet seen. Or even
Yes.
a city you haven't yet experienced because you've been working so much, literally. Yeah, and isolating the problem, changing that. Of course, there was a challenging period while leaving the job and going through another intense job search to find a remote job and to start my
Mhm.
coaching certification. But once that period passed, everything started to flow. And yeah, it was just a whole different experience living there. And my community grew and now it's like home to me. And
Mhm.
had I not isolated the problem and given up, this is another encouraging message for others who get a rocky start in a new place, is I would have never experienced so much of the growth that came after living in Buenos Aires and like seeing. There is a transition period and
Yeah.
accepting the bumps.
And I think that also touches on my mission as well, because wherever you go, there you are, right? And so had you not isolated the problem and just said, "But it's Argentina. Let me move to New York. Let me move somewhere else." And you could go down this cycle of constantly just switching, but not actually addressing what it was that was the issue. So you'd find another stressful, techie 12 plus hour day job in a different city and feel you were in the same spot until you left again. And so I think that this also touches upon the importance of really sitting with those feelings.
Yeah, and that connects to something I'm very passionate. The core principle is no band-aid fixes. You
Mm.
can't just put a band-aid on it and expect it to change. You have to address the root. If the root is unhappiness because of the work you're in, no matter where you are, if you're in that work, you're going to be unhappy. You have to address
Mhm.
the root. And band-aids are quicker to put on, but addressing the root takes more work and it takes more resilience, but it's a bigger payoff when you heal the wound rather than stick a band-aid on it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I love that analogy. It's so perfect, especially now in the lifestyle of digital nomading that we both live. And I know that we've both met and have lived that ourselves, the process of constantly moving in search for that missing. And you and I are now do some slower travel because I think the piece that I want to instill in others is the intentionality. Just because you're traveling around doesn't mean that you're constantly trying to escape. I'm the biggest advocate for travel, but travel is a way to grow yourself. You could also travel as a way to distract yourself. And so there's a very clear difference in the difference in intentionality. What are you intending to do? What is the environment that you want to create for yourself to better yourself rather than run away? So let's chat about digital nomading and how then, okay, so you are a remote career and lifestyle coach traveling now, I know, all throughout South America, Central America. You've been all throughout Europe as well this year. So what was that transition for you living full-time as an expat in Buenos Aires to then taking the leap to this lifestyle?
Yeah. So fast forward through all that time period we just talked about, and to the other side of having a remote job and finishing my coaching certification and starting to coach. Again, people sometimes see the end result, and this is important to highlight, and
Mhm,
and don't see the journey. And that was the
mhm,
journey, which was very challenging. But then there is the beauty of the end result and the payoff, which is what the lifestyle is now.
mhm,
And for me, the nomadic lifestyle kind of organically happened because when I did go remote and start coaching, I was like, "Ooh, now I can travel more." And
mhm,
so I was treating BA as the home base and wanting to do, okay, I'm going to go to Bolivia and come back. I'm going to go to Brazil and come back. And so end of 2019, I did Bolivia and I came back. And then I started to map out my plan for 2020. And then the pandemic hit.
mm,
And so that whole plan of just nomading with a home base in BA shifted. The lockdowns happened. As we all know, things got crazy.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
then I ended up leaving Argentina because it was so intense there and I didn't know what was going to happen. And they only had the flights for repatriation to get you back home.
Mhm,
So I was like, things were just so uncertain as they were everywhere. So I decided to take a flight back to the US. And then being in the US, nope, couldn't, decided to take a flight to Mexico where a friend was. And then that turned into starting the slow travel lifestyle through Mexico because of circumstance of Mexico being the where many of us found ourselves in 2020
Yeah.
being open to travelers. And so it really just turned into it through that experience of the pandemic and ending up in Mexico.
And then you've just been flowing around the world since then.
Yeah, exactly. And it's of course evolved a ton since Mexico, but
Mhm,
Mexico I slow traveled just by wanting to see more places in Mexico and making my way through there. Restrictions lifted and you could travel more. But then I discovered that it was just a good pace for being able to balance work, for being able to really immerse. And it just
mhm,
evolved because I realized when I was in a place for too quick, it was super hard to find community. I
mhm.
didn't feel connected and it just didn't feel the same or it didn't fulfill the intentions that I knew I had living the lifestyle.
And what's the pace that you travel? What's your ideal travel pace now?
So it's been 3 months and I'm curious for you too what this is
Yeah.
now because it changes.
Yeah,
So it
it
was
does.
3 months, but this year it's six, I think,
Yeah.
or 12.
Yeah. Yeah, my ideal is 3 to 6 months because as you mentioned, and I've been in many places for just 1 month or 2 months, sometimes you can't help it if you're planning on going to an event or meeting up with friends, or you have to be somewhere, right? So, you have to just
Yeah.
choose a place along the path. So, for example, I had to make my way to Puerto Rico after Argentina, so I was in a lot of different places to just because again, it's really far. You just gotta make your way up there. So yeah, so those places were a few weeks or a month or two. But the difference, as you mentioned, is the community. And you can feel
Mhm.
it. When you are in the first month, you're like, oh, maybe you meet someone, you see them like max 2 times, 3 times, and you're not even really, you can feel that you're like, oh, had we had more time together, we would probably be really solid friends. But now we're just gonna be following each other on Instagram until we die. Or see each other again, which also happens. But
Reacting to
yeah,
stories here and there.
exactly, but I exist still. Here you go, heart. But yeah, there's definitely a shift, and that shift happens around the 3-month mark because you start to do things that are more mundane. You're like, hey, do you want to go grab money from the Western Union with me? Do you want to like run or just sit with me as we work? It's not always about the let's go do something fun and exciting and go on a big tour. Those are great to have the experiences together, but where I find that you have the most meaningful connected time is in those down moments where you could just be and see how you are just being with someone else next to you, and whether that energy is comfortable, whether there are things that you can say and not say, and it just be natural. That doesn't happen until at least a few months. And month point, I think, is so magical because you're familiar with the places, you've gone to most of the things that you've wanted to try, and now it's just about building consistency and investing in relationships that feel good. And then at the 6-month mark, that's when I get. So
You get the adventure itch again.
yeah,
No,
exactly. Yeah.
I completely agree with all of that you just shared, and it's so fascinating how there's a shift moment, and it usually is around 3 months, where it
Mhm.
goes from, "I'm here and exploring," to, "Oh, I know this pretty well now, and
Mhm.
I'm starting to really get clear on my people, and this is my community," and it
Mhm.
starts to shift at 3 months, typically. After
Yeah.
doing it multiple places, I can identify and say that it's around
Yeah.
3 months. I have experimented with this.
Yeah,
And then
same.
and then you hit the 3-month mark and you pass it, say, and then there's a
Mhm.
bit of attachment of, "Ooh, I really like it here, but
Mhm.
I have plans to go here, or I wanna explore here too." And then it's that grieving when you say goodbye
Mhm.
of because you've hit that shift where it's meaningful and you have your places, you have your community, so you're saying goodbye to people. And I think it's the shift is so interesting because it is
Yeah.
you feel it.
And that's actually then the beautiful thing with the lifestyle and the people that I've met, and because I'm attracting now people that are adventurous and love travel and have very similar values to me. Is I see everyone multiple times around the world in different cities, and so even if they're not full time traveling, we'll now plan different times where we'll see each other. Maybe in those in between moments where I don't have a 3 to 6 month stay somewhere, maybe I meet them on my way somewhere, stop over, or maybe we do plan time where we're co-living in a city together. And it's nice because then you have those downtime moments where you're actually really building the relationships rather than just doing things together.
What else I love is a friend of mine was laughing about this because I always talk about, "Oh, the virtual friend I met in real life
Yeah.
is all the virtual friends I've been meeting in
Yes.
different places." So, in
Hmm.
Mexico City, I met a friend who we got super close through kind of a mastermind group, and then ended up in Mexico City at the same time, and the virtual to in real life meetings is so cool, but so unique
Yeah.
to this lifestyle.
It is. Yeah, I've met so many friends through Instagram, through Facebook, through random online forums. Yeah, it's wild. And actually, oh god, I've I can talk to you forever about this subject, of course, but we are nearing towards the end. Maybe we'll do a second part of this episode to dive in a little bit on the last couple of years. But since we're on the topic of connection, what have been the most meaningful connections that you've made in this journey? How did you meet those?
Surprise. I'm gonna talk about Buenos Aires for
Yes.
everyone who constantly hears about it. No, but I would say that's the place. that has that in Mexico City. I've made the
Mhm.
most meaningful long-term connections. We met there. Here's one here. I shared we met there. I shared about this experience with my work, and having these really meaningful friendships who helped me through a really challenging period abroad and that I felt really alone. And so also coworkers I met at that job who supported me through that were locals as well, local friends and expat friends. I think it's maybe it connects to this is something that just clicked for me experiences you have in places that are
Mhm.
super transformative and the connections that are with you through that.
Mm.
Because when I think about both Mexico City or Mexico and I think about Argentina, they both are the most transformative countries I've lived in terms of experiences. And I also will say I have the most meaningful long-term connections from those two countries. Not to say they're
Oh.
not in other places, but it stands out to
Yeah.
me.
That's gotten me thinking now too, because as I'm thinking about the people that, yeah, I still meet around the world, keep in touch with regularly, they were there during very transformative moments. And that's actually a really beautiful realization because in those times are when you see someone, you feel their support and you can really see, can I count on this person? Are they
Yeah.
there? Yeah, and that's a really beautiful epiphany.
Yeah, it's like the trust, yeah,
It builds
because it's
fast.
your vulnerable moments, you're not at your maybe at your best, or you're going through a
Mhm.
big change.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily, let's say, there's a fine line between trauma bonding, right? And this, I think the beautiful thing is, yes, I can think about the people that were there in the transformative moments, but they're also the ones that were there in the playful and in the light moments as well. It didn't
Yes,
all just feel heavy. We were able to navigate between all the different emotions. And from those dark moments that I might have been through in the transformation, they helped with the light as well, and I think that
yes, yes, being there through all the phases, right?
Mhm,
And the very positive, fun, happy memories, and then maybe the times when you needed support and they were there, and vice
mhm,
versa for each other.
exactly.
But yeah, that was a light bulb moment for me too.
Yeah. You're like, "Oh, wow, we're constantly learning with this whole connection thing." Do you have any fun tips for others that are looking to make and nurture meaningful connections on the go?
Yes, and we haven't talked about this yet, so I just
Yes.
brush over it, but it's very connected to play, which is a topic of this as well, so I'm gonna loop it in. But dance.
Oh.
I know you're into dance too, and
Mhm,
I would say it's pure connection, right? That's what it runs off of. And so I think it's a great way to build connection in new countries is there's many local dances in Latin America, but finding what your passion is. If movement and dance is one of those, for me it's been the best way to find local community and also build connection and also grow in a hobby or a passion that brings flow.
yeah, and that was actually my next question is how is play part of your life? Which I know the answer to, but it sounds like dance is the way that you're still feeling into that kinesthetic play style that you have.
Yes, and growing deeper into how to make it because it can be uncomfortable. It can be
Mhm.
challenging,
Yeah.
as we both know, and it takes trust and confidence and all of those different skills that you build
Mhm,
through doing it. But then then it gets to a place where it's flow and play, which is the beauty.
mhm,
So yeah, I think it's constantly growing with that so that it feels like play and
mhm.
stress-free and like
And light,
flowing.
yes.
Yes.
And fluid, yes, I love that.
Yeah.
And so as we're wrapping up, I ask a couple of closing questions for to help other women who are just starting their journey. And so, what is one question that you wish you could have asked your younger self sooner at the start?
This is such a great question for a question. And I think when I think of this question and the younger self, I think of rewind to what we talked about, being in San Francisco, feeling super stuck in a job and trying to figure out what the missing piece was and having this itch, but not acting for over a year before I really did the whole storage, book the ticket thing. And a question is, why can't you trust yourself and your intuition?
Mm.
Because I think had I asked myself that then, it would be like, yeah, everything's telling me I want to do this. What's keeping me from doing it?
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to say now, but after building a deeper understanding of intuition and a connection to it, it's more of a no-brainer of, oh yeah, if I'm feeling this way, I need to do that.
Yeah.
So asking that question to yourself is what's keeping you from that trust. If your inner guide is giving clear signals.
That's a beautiful question, and I think we take for granted the concept of trust. And I myself realize moments where I'm like, oh, I actually don't trust myself. And it's like, why? Why don't I trust myself? What is this underlying belief that caused me to not trust in myself? Like, in what where was there earlier in my life moments where I felt betrayed? Did I betray myself? It goes so much deeper, but it starts from asking that first question of, why don't you? And then allowing yourself the space to really respond and answer that question, because a lot of things come up, as we know. It is a very deep question. We dive in. There's things that link to your inner child and how you were raised. There are things, so the connections that you made in life and how all of it, it's
Mhm.
all interconnected. We are not silos in this world. And so once you realize that this question is a larger question, but it's important to start with it, I think it's such a big tipping point. So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that question.
Yes. And paying attention to
And
the answers that come up.
yeah, mention listening to it, not stuffing it deep down into the darkness. It's comfortable to do sometimes. What is one last tip for women that you would give them if they're considering traveling solo for the very first time but have some blocks or are a little bit hesitant? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think from what we started, this is a good full circle question because looking back in what kind of really clicked for me today that I haven't really thought about fully till now, which is crazy, is the building blocks of it doesn't have to, everyone sees or many see the digital nomad lifestyle and think, oh, it's got to be the full leap. Which honestly, if you want to go for the full leap, I'm all about leaps, so go for it.
Yeah.
But don't forget the power of trial runs, right? You could go to a Mexico City for a month to test it out, or go to a destination that's drawing you to test it out, right? So I think experimenting is a great way to get to know if something is for you or not for you. So
Mhm.
just allowing yourself to do that in a way that feels, especially if you feel really afraid and fear is normal, right? What's a way that feels more comfortable to test it out? Maybe it's closer to home, even if it's as much as trying a new city in your own country, right? So just encouraging, don't underestimate those smaller steps versus taking a full leap.
And this last tip is so key, and it's one that's come up over and over again. And I'm loving that it is, because it gives you permission to try. And I think that is not only relevant for solo travel, but in all areas of our life. It even sounds very specifically in terms of career, where, hey, just try it out, just
Yeah.
explore what it could look like to start your own business, to be a digital nomad. Little things, it could just, and maybe it's not a full business that you build right away. Maybe it's just a side thing that you start with that feels light and something that you may want to explore. So it gives people permission in all different areas of their life to just be curious.
Yeah, and then connected to this, just another point is that you can always go back. Just like if you
Hmm.
try out a new job and you decide that you miss your old career, it's not like your past experience has just gone away, right?
Yeah.
So I think so many people are afraid to take risks because they're afraid they lose everything going for the new thing. But it's no, your experience, your history, your past is still there. It's going for it and knowing that you can always go back to where you were before, or who knows where it could take you next by going for it and taking that risk, right?
You gain more than you lose, for sure. And as a good segue into the work that you do, I'd love it if you could share exactly the type of services that you offer, the type of clients that you work with. I'm curious myself.
Yes. So my focus is remote career and lifestyle coaching. I also coach for career transitions in general. I don't discount hybrid. I'm not anti-hybrid for people who, or in office for people who that's for them. I have clients in all the spaces, but what I help my clients with is identifying fulfilling work that they can do remotely. So uncovering purpose through fulfilling work, and whether that's in, again, the other settings, because we've got many types now, or fully remote, but helping them uncover what that is and then go after it. And then also the lifestyle piece, managing this lifestyle and balancing work as well as building the lifestyle. Right now, a lot of my focus is on the career side, but in the year to come, there's going to be some exciting new shifts with the lifestyle side. So I'm doing one-on-one coaching right now. So I have a one-on-one program, but I also plan to expand into group in the next year. So that's
Oh,
the
excited.
evolution of coaching.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I will link all of your information below. So if anyone is feeling that itch right now, maybe you're also feeling called to change careers, to move somewhere different, or maybe you don't even know what you need, how you started, where you're like, there's something off. I don't know what it is. You can reach out to Kristin because you've already navigated this in your own life. And it's always helpful to have, again, as we were mentioning, a mirror, someone to tell you and guide you and hold you accountable to the big changes that you want to make in life. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you so much for being on this podcast and being an amazing friend. And I've just enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. So much came up in this that has
Yeah.
been epiphanies for me. I'm just processing that, and new things I haven't shared on podcasts before really came up here. So I really enjoyed it. And also, I've taken away so much from our conversation. So thank
Yay.
you for having
Yay.
me.
So happy. And thank you all navigators for tuning into this episode. I really hope that Kristin's story of transformation, connection, and play resonated with you all today. Thank you so much. And I will see you all in the next
And
adventure.
I have one
Oh,
more
yeah.
thing to add, if possible, as a
Oh,
closer. I
yeah.
love the name of this podcast, and I want to just highlight that traveling does not need to be a way to escape. Traveling is actually the most beautiful channel to meet yourself deeper. And that has been one of my greatest learnings from this lifestyle. So I want to help smash the stigma on escapism and
Yes.
share about how it is just the way to deeply know yourself. And that is the beauty.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you included that because this is perfect and a great way to close. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you later.
Thank you.
We chatted about some great connection tips in the episode, but if you're looking to learn the secret to how to make meaningful connections while you're solo traveling, save your seat for the free workshop I'll be hosting on January 24th. That's www.travelnotsescape.com/free class and also on the show notes. See you there. Until next time, keep exploring, connecting, and playing, and safe travels, navigators.